Coming up on our next installment of America's Hope, 60 years ago, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech during the 1963 March for Jobs and Freedom. 60 years later, the question is still being asked, how far have we come beyond the dream? All that and more tonight on America's Hope. Good evening, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope. On this day, 60 years ago, a young Baptist preacher stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and awakened the world to his dream of a beloved community. They came by bus, plane, car, and on foot to hear the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. challenge America to uphold the American dream of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. King's dream resonated with people of every race, tribe, tongue, and ethnicity, not only in Washington, but around the nation and around the world. He stated that he dreamed of a world where his four children would not be judged by their color, but by the content of their character. That was 60 years ago. And today, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris met with members of Dr. King's family to share a moment of reflection, but also pledge to keep pursuing the dream. The president citing the recent racially motivated murders in Jacksonville, Florida. A 21-year-old white man killed 3 black people at a Dollar Tree store on Saturday, the same day that thousands gathered in Washington to commemorate and continue the 60th anniversary march on Washington and pursue the dream.
I'm talking directly to the American people because I think the vast majority of the American people agree with this table. But we have to understand this is serious. I said a little earlier when I came in and sat down, I think this is as serious a potential turning point for the negative as it was when the turning point for the positive when your dad organized that march. I really think this is a critical time. We have groups, a significant minority, but I think they want to change the direction that we've been working on so hard and making such significant progress on for so long. And we can't let it happen. We just have to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our country was founded on many noble principles, and I believe each of us has a duty to not allow factions to sever our unity, and foundational principles that out of many, we are one.
America's Hope attended the 60th anniversary march in Washington, and here now are a few of the speakers.
3,000 years ago, there was a man who was a master of dreams. His name was Joseph, and when he was a child, he had a dream that the stars and the sun and the moon bowed down to him, and he told his brothers about this dream, and they hated him for it. And they sold him into slavery, and he went to Egypt, where in a dungeon he interpreted dreams and grew to interpret the dreams of Pharaoh and became viceroy of Egypt. And the question is, Joseph fell by dreams and he rose by dreams. What's the difference? The difference is that Joseph fell when he could only hear his own dreams, and he rose when he began to hear the dreams of others. This is a spot where America learned to listen to others' dreams, to the dreams of its own that it had shut out for so long. And this is a time when we renew our listening to each other's dreams. And I want to describe that dream to you with a simple story. There was a boy named Hugo Gryn who grew up to be a rabbi in England, but when he was a child in Auschwitz in a concentration camp. In 1944, the worst place in the world, a place of death and destruction and cruelty and horror. And it was the middle of the winter and bitter cold. And he was there with his father, and his father took the margarine ration and used it to light the candles of the winter festival of Hanukkah. And Grin said to his father, "How can you do this? This is our food. This is what we live on." And his father told him something that he never forgot. He said, "My child, we have learned that you can live for 3 weeks without food. You can go for 3 days without water, but you cannot live for 3 seconds without hope." And that's why we're here. Because whatever the conditions are that together we have faced, in whatever places, at whatever times, we have never, ever given up hope. We still believe in the promise of this moment and of this place. That anti-Semitism, racism, all sorts of hatred and bigotry, that it can be overcome. That is the dream and that is the hope. As the Talmud says, you don't have to finish the work, but you're not allowed to give up on it.
Hello, everybody. I'm Andrew Young, and I've been here before. I was here 60 years ago, but I was also here 66 years ago in 1957. It's been a long but wonderful struggle. And I'm here to tell you that I don't feel no ways tired. We've come too far from where we started from. And nobody ever told us that the way would be easy. But frankly, as messed up as we can be, as difficult as life is, there is no place on earth that's any better than these United States of America. And if you don't understand that, remember, it was a blind man, Ray Charles, that said, "America the Beautiful." It was a man from the squalors of the slums of Louisiana and New Orleans, Louis Armstrong, that said, "It's a wonderful world." That if you look around and if you point your own beliefs in the direction that you want the nation and the world to go, and if you work toward those ends, you'll be surprised how many friends you have. You'll be surprised how many people from different countries want to work with us and want to be like us. I was privileged to go to the United Nations with Jimmy Carter as the president. But one of the reasons why Jimmy Carter got to be president was, as the governor of Georgia, he deputized every high school principal as a voter registrar. And you couldn't graduate from high school in Georgia unless you were a registered voter. And he understood, as we understand, that the vote is the passport to freedom and opportunity. That is hard work, but it's good work. It's people that I met running my first voter registration drive in 1953 in Thomasville, Georgia, that shaped my soul, that helped me to believe that all things are possible. Don't look at all the things that are wrong. Look back on where we were 66 years ago when we had the first March on Washington. And Martin Luther King said then, "Give us the ballot." And then he moved up and said, "But I have a dream." But he gave his life for that dream. And unfortunately, the best thing you can do with your life is give your life for the dream that all men and women and children are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. God has blessed you. Say thank you, Nine.
we need us all to be engaged. Dad would probably say, now is the time. We must preserve, protect, and expand democracy. We must ensure that voting rights is protected for all people. We must ensure that our women and children are treated fairly. We must end gun violence. And then, maybe one day we will be a great nation. We are not personifying greatness right now. But you know what? Dad and Mom taught us it takes a few good women and men to bring about change. So as I get ready to close, you may ask the question, well, Brother King, we understand what happened with history. We don't like it or accept it. We understand what happened with voting rights. We don't like it, but we must change it. But you may be asking that question that my father asked back in the late 50s. How long will it be? Well, I don't know exactly how long it'll be. But what I do know is no lie can last forever. How long, you may ask, will it be before we get our freedom? I don't know, but truth crushed the earth will rise again. How long? Not long. Because the moral arc of the universe is long, but bends toward justice. How long? Not long, because God Almighty is still on the throne. Let's not give up. Let's not give in. Let's not give out. We must move forward to make this nation the nation that it ought to be for all of God's children. Thank you, and God bless you.
If I could speak to my grandfather today, I would say, I am sorry we still have to be here to rededicate ourselves to finishing your work and ultimately realizing your hidden dream. 60 years ago, Dr. King urged us to struggle against the triple evils of racism, poverty, and bigotry. Today, racism is still with us. Poverty is still with us, and now gun violence has come for our places of worship, our schools, and our shopping centers. And that's not the only problem that earlier generations didn't expect, but my generation cannot escape. We have been warned about air and water pollution. We have been warned about global warming, and now, all my life, we have worried about environmental justice for communities of color and under-resourced people everywhere. But this summer, and for the rest of our lives, my generation will be worrying about global boiling. We need to do more than end racism on our planet. We need to do more than end poverty on our planet. We need to save our planet.
60 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood on these very steps and spoke of a dream. It was an American dream. The last 60 years have brought us a new reality. African Americans have experienced unprecedented wealth, education, upward mobility. Blacks are in positions of power more now than at any time in the history of this nation. The number of American black millionaires and billionaires continue to increase. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are an estimated 3.1 million African American or black-owned businesses in the United States. These businesses account for $72.5 billion in receipts. The new reality is because we have taken responsibility for our future. We've picked ourselves up by our bootstraps. With creativity, ingenuity, and perseverance, we have translated our gifts, talents, and abilities into value in the marketplace here in America and globally. However, somebody say however, as of 2021, according to the U.S. Census, blacks still have the highest poverty rate in the country at 19.5%, compared to non-Hispanic whites at 8.1%. At this very moment, we are still dealing with racial disparities in our criminal justice system, our policing system, our educational system, our healthcare system, and in economic opportunity. This means we haven't arrived. It means there's still a lot more work to be done. It means the systems and structures, policies and practices that continue to marginalize still need to be challenged. It's going to take all of us working together for a better America. Not an America of extremes, but a well-balanced America. An America founded in faith in God. Why? Because only our faith in God draws boundaries and protects us from when our humanity runs out. Are we there yet? No. Can we get there? Yes. How do we get there? I'm glad you asked. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. But don't mistake it. It's going to take prayer and work. God bless.
Just a few of the many speakers from the 60th anniversary march on Washington. But what did the people in attendance have to say? We'll have their comments after the break. And welcome back. During the 60th anniversary march on Washington, I talked to several people, young and old, and all races, to get a sense of why they came. Talk to me about what it was like that first time in 1963.
Okay, I was a 17-year-old, just finished high school, but my mother was always a civil rights activist, and I followed in her footsteps. As a matter of fact, in 1948, she received an award from President Truman for her efforts to get people registered to vote. And back then, you paid a poll tax of $1.50, which probably was the cost of a couple of meals for a family.
Wow.
So I've been active in civil rights off and on since, my whole life, basically. I was probably one of the first persons that protested the Stores for Integration back in 1960, I believe it was, when I was in high school.
So when you came here to the march, you came from where?
Richmond, Virginia. I came with the NAACP, and I actually have a picture on my phone of my ticket stub. The round trip cost was $4.
Wow. And then when you heard the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak, what was that like?
It was awesome. I was just a young kid, and I didn't realize the significance of, it was great to be there, but it's even greater to be here after 60 years, So
Still brings up the emotion.
It does. It really does.
Let me ask you something. 60 years later, the dream continues. We still have some work to do.
A lot of work.
How far have we come, and where do we go from here?
Well, unfortunately, we have a lot of work to do because we've taken steps backwards in the last 5 or 6 years, in my opinion. When Obama was elected, I remember saying to someone, we've reached the mountaintop, but apparently we got pushed back down the mountain. And so we've got to kind of basically start all over again because we're not there and we have a long ways to go.
What's your hope for America?
I would hope to see, like Dr. Martin Luther King, when all children, black children, white children, can be together as one body of people where we love everybody, black, white, purple, or green. Everyone loved everyone. That's my hope for this America and for the world.
The role that your organization has here today, where they're saying it's not a commemoration but a continuation of Dr. King's dream, how important is that to you?
It's extremely important for us to be one of the co-sponsors. Because back in 1963, 60 years ago, Asian Americans were only 0.3% of our American population. It's because of Dr. King that we have a lot of our rights here today. And so it's incumbent upon our community to continue that dream, to continue pursuing justice for everyone.
It really is, and it is very loud out here, but people are passionate about what they're talking about. What's your hope for America?
My hope for America is that we unify. we continue to build solidarity between all of our communities. One of the things that we know is that there are people that are trying to divide us, people that are trying to drive a political wedge between our community especially and black and brown communities. And we can't be part of that. We can't be complicit in that. So we have to stand up, we have to march, and we have to continue to fight for all Americans, not just Asian Americans.
You want to see a unified America?
Yes. I mean, that's been one of the strengths of America is our diversity. It's a fact that we continue to welcome people to our shores and that becomes part of our economy, part of our fabric of this country. And that's not a pipe dream. It's not something that should be that hard. It just feels hard sometimes when there are forces working against us. But it's why moments like this are just so important to bring us all together, to just unite and see that we are stronger together, and to see that we are actually the majority in this country.
I've often said that America is a country that shines like a beacon of hope to the rest of the world. Does that still hold true?
I think that absolutely still holds true. I know that's been being tested right now, and there are people working against that. But certainly if you talk to a lot of Asian American immigrants, they want to come to the United States because they see this as a better place than what they have back in their home countries. And so we need to continue to build a country that welcomes them in and gives them the rights so that they can prosper. And if they prosper, all of America will prosper.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of talk around here today, but do you have concerns about our adversaries like China and Russia? They're constantly looking at us and seeing, will our division break us?
Well, there's no question. And certainly that has happened throughout history, too. That people will look at our diversity, look at when we fight against each other, and think that presents an opportunity. At the same time, I think that's what makes democracy so great. Yes, it's messy, but at the same time, that's how we come out more unified, too.
What it was like for you to be here in 1963 and actually hear the speeches and a remarkable young man by the name of Martin Luther King Jr.
That was a different time. And I think people really didn't know. The leaders of this country didn't know what the march was doing and what it ought to be doing. And you read in the paper that John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy were in the White House, worried about violence, worried about how many people were going to be there. And so I think there was a very new message at that time that began there. It didn't end there. And so the dream part, I think, comes as much from what came after the march than what happened during the march. And I think the following is true, but even if it isn't, it's a good story, is that the I Have a Dream part of Martin Luther King's speech was not in the script. You know, if he handed out what the speech was going to say, I Have a Dream speech was not part of that. I mean, he gave that in other speeches in different places, Detroit and I think like that, but never as the conclusion of the march. And I think now it is known as the I Have a Dream March, you know, as if it, and it's good that it is, formally talked about that I have a dream rather than the country owes us a bad debt. You know, they gave us a check that bounced. That was the theme of his major spoken. So fighting that through and moving toward what is it that we can create, I think is probably the message that comes out of that first march.
Why you're here today?
I am frightened to see the issues regarding voter suppression around the country. I think that's the number one issue that I'm here for. There's all of the issues we're talking about today are important, but I think that's the core of stopping where we go in the future. So that's why I'm here to talk about some strategies and hear what they have to say.
What's your memory of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his famous I Have a Dream speech and the legacy that he leaves with that?
I was not alive, but I do have. This is my father, and he grew up in South Texas, Jim Crow South Texas, where he had to pay poll taxes. So I know where my family came from, and I would like to see that never happen again. And so it's reality. I see things. I'm from Houston. I live here, but I grew up in Houston. And some of the things that I hear about voting issues there are the things that we are hearing, from when he grew up. So
Dad, let me ask you. This time that we're living in nowadays, yeah. What are your memories of what it was like growing up in Texas when Dr. King came on the scene?
Oh, I think I was in high school when it happened 60 years ago. So I knew about it, and it was a turning point in many ways.
Please welcome General President of Alpha Phi
I think it's important.
I think in his world, he told me that this experience was might as well have been another country, another planet from where he grew up, and so isolated in South Texas. So what he saw was on TV, and for him to be a part of it in person today, to touch the history and is really important to him. That's why we brought. This is not an easy task to bring a wheelchair.
I mean, you've got you out here walking with your walker. So it shows your determination to be here. What I got to ask you, as a daughter and father, what's your hope for America, for the American family and the American dream?
I have two daughters, and I would like to see them be able to have an experience where we don't need to come to rallies like this again. I think that's the biggest thing.
Where are you from?
I'm from Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. Yeah. You came a long way to the tent.
Yeah. I came out here with the ADL. I believe supporting equality is very important, and I'm honored to be able to have come and see the reenactment and see the march happen again.
Yeah, the theme of the march is not a commemoration, but a continuation. Is that all about trying to get to a place of fulfilling the dream that Dr. King had?
I do think so. I think we have a long way to go. We've come a long way, but we still have to keep going.
Let me ask you, what's your hope for America?
That we stop viewing each other as different concepts. That at the end, the idea of man, woman, black, white, Jewish, Christian, Muslim just dissolves away.
Sounds like you're talking about the human element, treating each other as human beings. Is that getting beyond the echo chambers of politics?
I do think so. I think we need to recognize that these emotions we have, fear, happiness, joy, they all present the same way in the body. But we react to different things that presents us, and we have to understand why we react to the things we react to, why we make the choices we make, and that is the way we move beyond the hate.
Where are you guys from?
Winston-Salem State University.
Winston-Salem State University. That's a great university. Talk to me about why you're here.
Well, I think it's very important to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, especially to celebrate how far black people have come in America, and not only that, just to celebrate the civil rights movement as a whole. Yeah. It's very important.
Is it about all people?
Yes, I definitely think that it's about all people. That's what we're here for. We're here for human rights. We're here for equality. We're here for civil rights. And it's really important that individuals get out and vote. I mean, we haven't always been able to vote when it comes to being a part of the African American race. So it's nice that we are able to now.
You're pretty young, and you're out here representing your university as well as your own dream for America. What is it?
Justice for all in terms of civil rights and health rights for all people. We deserve it as people.
What's your hope for America?
My hope for America is that we all can come together and find a mutual grounding and understanding of differences amongst others, so that way we can get work done, policies in place to help all people in America.
Coming up next, we'll talk about what the faith-based community can learn from Dr. King. Jeffrey Wright, the CEO of Urban Ministries Incorporated, joins us after the break. And welcome back to America's Hope. I'm Kelly Wright, and our next guest recently wrote an article about what we can learn from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He wrote it for the magazine Christianity Today, which is one of the leading newspapers in the faith publications. And so joining us now is Jeffrey Wright, CEO of Urban Ministries Incorporated and co-author of the book Nonprofit Leadership in a For-Profit World. Jeff, good of you to join us this hour. Thank you for joining us, by the way. I want to ask you, based on your article, what are the 3 mandates that Dr. King, in your opinion, has taught us about sharing the dream?
It's a very great question, and it's an important one. Dr. King, in sharing his own dream in that incredible speech 60 years ago, pointed us toward the main things that Jesus Christ himself stood for, and that is love and justice, and it's really more than 3, but hope and perseverance in the midst of struggle and all of the challenges that face us here in America and the world generally. These are core principles that we need to all live into, live for, and live toward if we're going to have the kind of world that Christ envisioned, that God is bringing, that prayer that we always pray, on earth as it is in heaven, brings the kingdom to this earth now. And that's what we need to be focused on.
Yeah, and you've really been pointed about that and reminding all Americans and the world what Dr. King really stood for. While he was ecumenical, he brought in everybody into his understanding of the world through a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview, I should say. You stated in your article that Dr. King understood the value of privilege and higher education. That I found very interesting. What can people learn from Dr. King's privilege and turning his privilege into purpose?
This is a really important point, Kelly. Many people tend to see King as lots of things. They may know he's a minister of the gospel. A lot of people don't know that. They know he's Dr. King, but they forget the Reverend Dr. King. But most people have no idea of the sacrifice that he made from a life of privilege as a African-American growing up just one generation, really, 2 generations removed from slavery. He was born into a privileged household. His father was the pastor of what we would call a megachurch in Atlanta. His father had a degree from Morehouse College. King himself went on to earn a degree from Morehouse. And we tend to forget just how much educational experience is a part of privilege. Even today, somewhere around 30%, just 30% of Americans graduate with a bachelor's degree. Well, King's father had a bachelor's degree from Morehouse College. King himself went on to earn a PhD at Boston University. And in between that PhD and that bachelor's, a second degree. And this is at a time when very, very few Americans of any color, ethnicity had a PhD, and that's still true today. I mean, you're in the 1% range. That was a guarantee of a life of privilege. So King was born into a middle-class family, a pastor's family, got a great education, and basically could have just did what most people would do, take over his dad's church and just be a middle-class, successful pastor. But instead, he gave up that privilege for these principles that are so important to us and for people who were the least among us. That's what his life represented, and that's something that often we forget.
I'm so glad you bring that to the forefront because a lot of people, as you've stated, is duly noted, have forgotten the Reverend in front of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the fact that he was a very successful man and could have rested on his laurels, like you talked about, and rode his father's coattails. But that wasn't his plan. He actually sacrificed his privilege, as you talked about, for the cause of denouncing man's inhumanity to man and raising the consciousness of helping each other. So what's your message to the church today? Because there are some who would say the church has not been on the front lines in this fight for equality as it should be. and has not actually fulfilled all that Dr. King had envisioned?
So my message is one for the church, but more specifically for the church in America. American Christians of any color are the richest Christians on the planet. And we tend to forget that though the US population is just under 5% of the global population, we are the richest nation in the history of the world. And when you find yourself in a place of wealth, power, political influence, and the ability to protect yourself with the greatest military in the history of the world, there's some unique callings that God has for you. And we find these examples in Scripture. Moses and Joseph, Esther, Nehemiah, Daniel, even Jesus, all found themselves placed as people of God in small but wealthy, powerful nations. So I am suggesting that what King's life exemplified, which is what all of ours should exemplify, is when you find yourself in a nation that has this kind of power and impact, you've got a responsibility to the rest of the world, of course, to the people in your own nation, but it is from that place of power and privilege that American Christians, all American Christians, are called to act in a unique and a special way.
Jeff, what you just stated is very powerful, in my opinion, responding to what you're saying. It kind of echoes the sentiment of Dr. King, who talked about the fact that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that, and hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing as this great nation, reaching out to help each other across political aisles and breaking through racial and ethnic and cultural divisions?
We know who the author of division and confusion is. It's certainly the enemy of God and the enemy of God's people. And what better way to neuter the church, to take away our power, than to divide us among each other? And as we get divided among ourselves, we completely overlook the opportunity that we have to do good for our own nation and certainly for those abroad. And I believe that this is a critical call for all of us to love in the way that Dr. King laid out in his teachings and in the life that he lived. He lived a life of, yes, sacrifice of privilege, yes, concern for the least, but also a life of love that loved actively. And I'm suggesting that the scripture is very clear on this. The more you have, the more capacity you have to love. We've become so divided among ourselves that we're missing our opportunity for global impact. And I would suggest that if you think about this ethnically, as we tend to do so often in the U.S., and begin to understand that none of us chose where we were born or when we were born or what family we were born into, and we certainly didn't choose our gifts. So if God has placed you here for such a time as this, just as he did for Esther or Joseph or any of the biblical characters who found themselves in small and incredibly rich and powerful nations, that's a responsibility that God's waiting for you to take on, to be the presence of God in the lives of those who are the least. To me, that works for everybody in the U.S. We all find ourselves in incredible positions of power and influence, yes, to fix problems here, but also to address the issues facing our reference ethnic group. For me, as an African American, I care about Africa, but I'm sure if you were a French American Christian and the roof burned off in Notre Dame, you were concerned. But you should also be concerned about the state of Christianity in France, which, by the way, is not great.
Jeff, I appreciate you stopping by to share your insights, powerful insights, and very introspective about what the life of Dr. King was really like and what he really lived, fought, and died for, and that was to establish a beloved community. And certainly our work is still ahead of us. Jeffrey Wright, CEO of Urban Ministries Incorporated, we thank you for joining us this hour. And really, with all that you're doing, keep doing it. Don't be a stranger. Come back anytime. Thanks again, Jeff. My final word in just a moment. My final word tonight, just a few quotes from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He once stated, "Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools." And he added, "Love is the greatest force in the universe. It is the heartbeat of the moral cosmos. He who loves is a participant in the being of God." From those sentiments, I pray that we can keep spreading hope and love, freedom, and peace. Until next time, good night, America. Your America and my America.
United we stand, divided